In the innermost sanctum of the Temple of Isis at Philae, a structure meticulously engineered for the experience of threshold crossings where the sacred geometry itself appears to perform a deep filtering of consensual reality, the piercing, cool light of the moon is utterly and completely barred. Here, within this consecrated dark, only the restless, flickering, unstable light emanating from ceremonial torches dares to trespass, casting vast, kinetic shadows that twist and writhe like colossal, living serpents upon the ancient, meticulously sculpted limestone walls. A singular figure dominates the space. A priestess, her gaze fixed inward, raises her rod, an implement not of passive ritual display but of profound, active, energetic science. This staff, carved from richly polished wood, is intricately wound by two exquisitely stylized asps, the primordial ureus serpents, whose heads meet and embrace precisely at the crown, forming an inseparable cosmic knot. This wooden helix does not merely reflect the meager torchlight. It pulses, vibrating with a deep, internal, bioelectric energy that entirely transcends the dull, predictable confines of stone, earthly gravity, and fragile human flesh. She does not merely vocalize a sound. She vibrates a name, a syllable of fundamental power that existed in the consciousness stream long before the sands of the colossal Sahara were ever formed, predating even the establishment and codification of the ancient Nile kingdoms. It is the primal, foundational appellation that the Hellenes ages later would attempt to capture and tragically dilute into the singular, familiar, and often sentimentalized concept of Sophia. Yet here, in this liminal, suspended hour, poised exactly between the absolute deep silence of midnight and the first pale, hesitant hint of dawn, the name resonates with its true, original, untamed potency. It is the very sound, the core frequency, of cosmic consciousness actively, ferociously remembering the entirety of its infinite self through the limited, sometimes agonizingly fragile channel of the human physical form. The tightly drawn circle of initiates surrounding her, having spent years of arduous, systematic practice meticulously preparing their bodies and refining their minds for this singular moment of revelation, feel it first, not as an auditory phenomenon perceived by their ears, but as a profound, systemic trembling deep within their physical architecture, a tectonic shift initiating deep in their spinal columns. This sacred vibration begins specifically at the coccyx, where a colossal potential lies coiled and dormant, explosively potentialized, like the magnificent ureus serpent meticulously depicted sleeping beneath the pharaoh's eternal, golden throne. Understand this clearly without any reservation. This is far more than a mere poetic device, a flight of fancy, or a simple mystical allegory. This is the sophisticated, living, operative technology of human transformation, the core gnosis that countless subsequent empires have systematically murdered, ruthlessly burned, and violently suppressed for the explicit purpose of maintaining external political and spiritual control, and which all orthodoxies built upon the model of external power have strategically and aggressively branded as demonic corruption. It is the foundational, indispensable truth that the feminine mystery schools meticulously encoded and concealed within every symbol of holistic healing, transcendence, and true self-sovereignty that we continue to recognize and utilize subconsciously even today. The staff the priestess grips with focused intensity is not just a ceremonial prop, a mere scepter of temporal office. It is, in profound reality, a sacred map, a precise, three-dimensional diagram of the entire human nervous system rendered in the universal, immutable language of sacred geometry. It is a biological promise whispered across millennia of darkness and forgotten history, that the potential lying deep within you, coiled, waiting, and forgotten, can awaken, can ascend through every level of your being, and can, in a single flash, transform the crude, limiting lead of your conditioned, temporal self into brilliant spiritual gold. This potent alchemy does not require an external crucible or a laboratory retort. It occurs solely, exclusively, within the fierce, transformative internal furnace of your own conscious becoming. What you are standing at the absolute edge of discovering right now will irrevocably realign your understanding of three seemingly disparate traditions we have been meticulously taught to view as entirely separate, isolated entities. You will witness the divine feminine wisdom embodied by Gnostic Christianity, the terrifyingly beautiful serpent power of Eastern yoga, and the systematic, transformative science of Egyptian alchemy. These are not merely parallel spiritual paths that occasionally, tentatively intersect. They are, fundamentally, the identical, single lightning bolt of divine gnosis striking through wildly different cultural landscapes, illuminating one fundamental, inescapable truth. That deep within the vertical axis of your own spine, resting coiled and immense at the base of your consciousness, lies the dormant, creative, explosive power of the divine feminine. It is a biological imperative, a mechanism waiting for the precise internal and external conditions to resurrect you into the highest, most luminous being you were always intrinsically destined to become. The unmistakable image of the caduceus, depicting two energetic serpents spiraling symmetrically around a central staff and frequently crowned with wings, appears everywhere in our contemporary world. On ambulances, pharmaceutical packaging, and powerful corporate logos. Yet, its profound, initiating true meaning has been deliberately sanitized, reduced, and warped into the mundane, harmless symbol of external, transactional medicine and commerce. But if you are willing to look through the proper, awakened lens of the initiated, if you dare to trace its lineage back through the millennia, past the subsequent appropriations by Greece and Rome, straight into the pulsating heart of the Egyptian mystery schools, you uncover a secret that the modern world has entirely, conveniently, forgotten. This is not merely an ancient logo devised by clever priests or artists. It is a precise, anatomical diagram, a step-by-step blueprint of the pathway to enlightenment itself, meticulously encoded by masters of consciousness who understood that Sophia herself, the divine feminine wisdom that actively radiates from the unknowable source, must first descend into the density of matter through this exact, biological mechanism, and then ascend back out through the very same pathway, enriched by the journey. The Corpus Hermeticum, those enigmatic, breathtakingly complex texts traditionally attributed to the thrice great master, Hermes Trismegistus, speaks compellingly of a singular, divine mind, nous, that permeates, structures, and animates all creation. A logos that operates eternally through the necessary dynamics of polarity and reconciliation. In the Poimandras, the very first and arguably most pivotal book of this corpus, we encounter the primal serpent, the Ophis, not as a figure of temptation, deception, or evil, but as the direct embodiment of divine intelligence moving, structuring, and unfolding creation itself. The text describes how the divine spark of nous descends into the binding constraints of materiality, and must subsequently remember its glorious, immaterial origin through a systematic process of awakening, rigorous purification, and ultimate ascent. This process is absolutely identical to what the Gnostics understood about the complex, tragic, and glorious mythos of Sophia. In the profound teachings of the Pistis Sophia, she is the Aeon, a divine emanation, who descends from the Pleroma, the fullness of divine reality, becoming tragically trapped within the suffocating embrace of matter and ignorance until, through fierce struggle and the intervention of the light, she remembers her essential, true nature and begins her arduous, illuminating ascent back toward ultimate unity. Walk with me now, not in mind but in transcendent spirit, into the breathtaking temple of Dendara, where the astronomical ceiling preserves something extraordinary, a vivid, enduring testament to this suppressed knowledge. Amidst the detailed astronomical charts, the zodiacal constellations, and the elaborate processions of deities, you will find depictions that modern, materialist Egyptologists confidently dismiss as nothing more than fragmented mythological scenes or quaint art. But the initiated eye immediately recognizes them for what they are: sophisticated, meticulously encoded Kundalini maps. The great goddess Hathor, who frequently merges her identity and attributes with Isis in the later, syncretic periods, is consistently shown with the Uraeus serpent, the striking cobra of ultimate sovereignty, rising directly and majestically from her crown and forehead. This is not merely an aesthetic choice or decorative flourish. The ancient Egyptian concept of the Ka, the bioelectric double often translated inadequately as life force, corresponds with astonishing precision to what the yogic tradition calls prana, the fundamental, cosmic life energy. The Run, the secret, true name that encapsulates one's essential spiritual nature, maps directly onto the concept of the Atman, the transcendental true self, and the explosive serpent power that the yogis termed Kundalini. The Egyptians knew this intimately as the Uraeus, the striking cobra of sovereignty and ultimate authority that majestically rises up the Jed pillar, the spiritualized spine, when consciousness fully awakens to its own intrinsic divine nature. But here is the critical point where this unifying story deepens into a truth the subsequent patriarchal traditions have worked tirelessly, violently, and effectively to obscure. The serpent wisdom, the powerful Kundalini technology, the staff of transformation. These principles belong, fundamentally and inextricably, to the feminine principle. Sophia is not a passive, waiting vessel who merely receives revelation. She is gnosis itself, the active, structuring, dynamic divine intelligence that gives reality its form, coherence, and transformative potential. When the revelatory text The Thunder, Perfect Mind declares, in a voice that shatters all duality, I am the first and the last. I am the honored one and the scorned one. I am the holy one and the whore. This is not a random collection of poetic contradictions designed to confuse. This is the very voice of the divine feminine describing her necessary, courageous descent into and her inevitable, enriched ascent from materiality. She is the serpent power because she is the precise, biological, and energetic mechanism through which unified consciousness differentiates itself into the millions of forms we call creation, and the exact mechanism through which that differentiated consciousness returns to the one, profoundly enriched by its experience of time and matter. In the Hindu tantric tradition, Kundalini is explicitly and universally depicted as a goddess. She is Kundalini Shakti, the coiled, inexhaustible reservoir of cosmic creative energy resting dormant at the base of the spine in the Muladhara chakra. She is the dynamic, kinetic, creative principle of the cosmos itself, Shakti, lying asleep in the majority of humans until she is violently awakened through rigorous spiritual practice, unexpected, profound grace, or sudden, shattering crisis. When she begins her monumental rise, she pierces through each of the 7 chakras, or energetic centers, until she reaches the Sahasrara, the crown, and merges in a sacred, ecstatic, and world-shattering union with Shiva, the masculine principle of pure, static consciousness. This union is not merely an abstract, remote symbol. Practitioners across all cultures and historical periods have consistently reported specific, measurable physiological phenomena accompanying this awakening. Intense, palpable heat rising along the spinal column, powerful, spontaneous spasms or involuntary movements, kriyas, overwhelming visions of pure light, and a temporary, yet profound, loss of the normal, conditioned ego identity. As this ascending energy purifies and fundamentally restructures the subtle body, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika describes it as the power that utterly illuminates all 6 chakras, the very force that bestows ultimate, absolute liberation. Now observe the caduceus once more, armed with this deeper, anatomical understanding of energetic flow. The central staff is the Sushumna Nadi, the neutral central channel running vertically along the spine, the primary path of ascent. The 2 serpents are the Ida and Pingla Nadis, the lunar, feminine, receptive, and solar, masculine, active, channels that cross and intertwine the Sushumna at each chakra point. In Egyptian terminology, the central staff is the Jed pillar, the symbolic backbone of the resurrected Osiris, the stable, unmoving axis of consciousness. The 2 serpents are the necessary reconciliation of opposites, masculine and feminine, solar and lunar, active will and passive receptivity, that must be perfectly balanced and reconciled for the initiate to progress one step further on the path toward self-mastery. The wings placed at the very top of the staff represent the achieved state of mastery, the consciousness that has successfully transcended duality and is now free to move consciously and without limitation between the physical and spiritual worlds. This is precisely why Hermes, in his Greek guise, carries the caduceus. He is the psychopomp, the skilled, knowledgeable guide of souls, the one who has fully mastered the complex, dangerous technology of consciousness transformation, capable of moving effortlessly between Olympus, the earth, and the underworld. The alchemical tradition, which drew heavily and directly from deep Egyptian and Hermetic sources, understood this blueprint completely. When the medieval alchemists spoke of the sacred marriage, the conjunctio, they were describing the passionate, volatile union of philosophical sulfur and mercury, the masculine and feminine, the solar and lunar energies. But the truly adept alchemists knew they were never merely discussing literal chemistry or the combination of base metals in a vial. They were encoding the dynamic, transformative process of Kundalini awakening within the human organism. The Negrito, the blackening stage, corresponds to the necessary death and dissolution of the conditioned ego as the serpent power begins its initial, destabilizing ascent. The Albedo, the whitening stage, represents the profound purification of the subtle body, the clearing of blocked nadis and chakras, bathing the system in pure light. The Rubedo, the reddening stage, is the final, ultimate transformation, the manifestation of the philosopher's stone, which is nothing less than the fully awakened sovereign consciousness, the divine human who has perfectly remembered their true, luminous nature and now radiates it into the world. The critical question that burns now is this: why was this profound, empowering, democratizing knowledge suppressed so thoroughly across so many cultures and centuries? Why did the powerful patriarchal religions systematically demonize the serpent, turning a universal symbol of wisdom and healing into an icon of evil and temptation? The answer reveals one of the greatest spiritual conspiracies in the entirety of human history. The serpent in the Garden of Eden was not the enemy of humanity. It was the initiator. It was offering gnosis, direct experiential knowledge of good and evil, which is the direct, active knowledge of duality and the necessary mechanism of how to transcend it. The jealous God who forbade this knowledge was not the true source, the infinite absolute beyond all names and forms. It was the demiurge, the limited, arrogant architect deity, often identified by the Gnostics as Yaldabaoth, the jealous, limited creator who desperately seeks to keep humanity blind and ignorant of its own immeasurable divine nature. And the serpent? The Gnostics understood it to be an agent of Sophia herself, the divine feminine wisdom, attempting to awaken humanity to its true, celestial heritage. This is precisely why early imperial Christianity had to aggressively demonize the serpent. This is why the powerful Kundalini practices were meticulously guarded and kept secret within closed, secret yogic lineages. This is why the magnificent Egyptian mystery schools were ultimately destroyed, their sacred temples defaced with fanatical fervor, and their priceless libraries burned. The overarching patriarchal control structure simply could not tolerate a technology of enlightenment that required no intermediary priests, that placed ultimate divine power directly within the individual human body, and that recognized the divine feminine as the active, dynamic principle of transformation and sovereignty. The staff and the serpent, taken together, represent autonomy. They represent direct experience. They represent gnosis rather than institutionalized, blind, and mediated faith. They represent the only true path of becoming fully human, which is synonymous with becoming fully divine. But the wisdom survived. It survived in the Nag Hammadi texts, carefully buried in sealed jars in the deep Egyptian desert sands, awaiting rediscovery by the modern world. It survived in the ecstatic tantric practices of Kashmir Shaivism, transmitted perfectly, precisely, and unbrokenly from master to student in continuous, living lineages. It survived in the precious Hermetic manuscripts that Renaissance magicians and philosophers risked their very lives and reputations to preserve and study. And crucially, it survived in the very bodies of mystics, shamans, and ordinary people who, unbidden and inexplicably, felt something coil and rise within them. They felt an overwhelming energy move in ways their rational minds were utterly unprepared to explain or categorize. They felt themselves radically, irrevocably transformed by an intelligence that was older than thought itself. Within your own physical body, at this very moment, this monumental potential lies coiled and ready. The tradition names it Kundalini or serpent power. But you may have recognized its stirrings in those moments when profound creativity surges through you without warning or explanation. When powerful sexual energy transmutes, unexpectedly, into spiritual ecstasy and insight. Or when sudden, overwhelming grief cracks you wide open, and something vast, oceanic, and intelligent moves through the fissures, restructuring your perception. The Egyptians knew that the Jed pillar, the spine, had to be strong, straight, and purified enough to safely channel and contain this colossal power. This is why their yoga was not just energetic or esoteric, but also rigorously physical, intensely moral, the practice of ma'at, and intellectually demanding. The initiate had to be fundamentally prepared. The personality had to be sufficiently refined and stabilized. The vessel of the body had to be purified, or the rising energy would not liberate, but violently destabilize and potentially destroy the mind and the physical form. Modern neuroscience is now beginning, tentatively and with great hesitation, to map these ancient mystical claims onto observable brain structures and physiological pathways. The massive vagus nerve, which runs directly from the brainstem down through the torso and links the brain to the gut, perfectly matches the ancient description of the Sushumna channel, the main axis of energy flow. The ascending reticular activating system, ARAS, which regulates arousal and the fundamental state of consciousness, aligns perfectly with the concept of energy rising dramatically from the base to the crown. The pineal gland, which synthesizes DMT and regulates circadian rhythms, sits precisely at the location the traditions call the third eye, the Ajna chakra, the neurological command center of higher perception. Science is merely rediscovering, in materialist, reductionist terms, what the mystery schools knew in profound, direct experiential terms, that the human body is an exquisite, sophisticated technology of transcendence, that consciousness can be precisely and deliberately altered through specific internal practices, and that enlightenment is not a mere metaphor or philosophical concept, but a profound, metabolic and neurological transformation. What remains now is not passive belief, but active, committed, fearless practice. The serpent and the staff are not just powerful symbols to contemplate from a safe distance. They are pressing, urgent invitations to personal, systematic experimentation. The yogic tradition offers pranayama, complex breath work that deliberately directs and moves energy through the nadis. The Gnostic tradition offers meditation on Sophia, calling her presence into the forefront of your awareness, feeling into the divine feminine intelligence that structurally permeates all matter. The Egyptian tradition offers the ritual of awakening the Ka, the life force, through specific posture, powerful sound, hey cow, and fierce, focused intention. These are not sentimental relics of a superstitious past. They are consciousness technologies, meticulously refined over millennia, waiting for you to validate them in the living laboratory of your own experience. The profound, undeniable truth that the caduceus encodes is this: you are not fundamentally broken. You are not a fallen creature. You are not inherently sinful or condemned. You are a divine being, perfectly formed, who has temporarily forgotten your true, magnificent nature. And the very mechanism of remembering is already built, coiled, and ready within your own body. The serpent power is Sophia herself, the dynamic wisdom of God, coiled at the base of your spine, waiting patiently for the precise conditions that will allow her to rise. When she does not obliterate your humanity or cast off your physical form. She transfigures it entirely. She shows you that flesh and spirit are not eternal enemies, but necessary, ecstatic lovers. That the body is not a limiting prison, but a sacred living temple. That the goal is not to escape the materiality of earth, but to fully divinize it, to saturate it with gnosis. This is the hidden teaching that flawlessly connects the banks of the Nile to the isolated, icy caves of the Himalayas, that links the Gnostic Redeemer to the Hermetic, alchemical adept. This is why the staff of Asclepius, the Greek god of physical healing, bears a single serpent. It represents the central channel, the direct path of initial purification and awakening. And this is why the caduceus of Hermes bears two serpents. It represents the mastery of duality, the perfect reconciliation of opposites that is the prerequisite for all true, effortless transcendence. Both symbols are true. Both are perfect, operational maps for the journey from sleeping consciousness to fully awakened divinity. And Sophia, the divine feminine wisdom, is the active, coiled power that accomplishes this absolute transformation in you, through you, and ultimately, as you. The initiates in that candlelit temple at Philae knew precisely what you are now beginning to remember. The serpent is not the enemy. The serpent is the savior. The staff is not a weapon of war or a tool of hierarchy. The staff is the stable, cosmic axis of your becoming. And the wisdom that unites them, the gnosis that illuminates the entire path, is Sophia descending into your matter so that your matter can finally, consciously remember that it is pure light. This is not ancient history confined to dusty, forgotten books. This is your immediate, living birthright, actively encoded in every symbol, in every nerve, and in the coiled potential that waits at the base of your spine for the glorious moment when you look inward and declare, "Yes, I am ready. Awaken me, transform me, show me what I truly am." The serpent stirs, the staff straightens, and Sophia smiles, because her lost, luminous child is finally coming home.